Laura Lopes decided to take a shot at Princess Anne in the middle of a Windsor castle reception, and Prince William's reaction shattered any illusion that this blended royal family is one big happy unit. What's wild about this story isn't just that someone made a catty remark at a party. Royals have been side-eyeing each other over canapes for centuries. It's that the comment revealed an underlying tension about who actually matters in the modern monarchy. William's response was so immediate and visceral that it triggered a private family meeting at Buckingham Palace that solved absolutely nothing. That's where this gets really interesting, because when you look at what was said versus how everyone reacted, you can see the fault lines that everyone's been politely ignoring for years. The whole thing happened at a reception honoring Princess Anne's charity work, especially her decades-long commitment to organizations like Save the Children. Anne had just reached her 20,000th royal engagement, a number that honestly makes every other working royal look like they're on a part-time schedule. She's involved with over 300 charities. She does more events annually than anyone else in the family. She's been doing this consistently for decades, never caring about fashion spreads, popularity contests, or the things that often preoccupy younger royals. This event was supposed to be her moment, celebrating the old-school dedication that helped build the monarchy's reputation. William was there because he genuinely admires his aunt. He's looked up to her since he was a kid and has often said privately that she showed him how to carry royal responsibility without losing your mind. So he expected a night of warm tributes. And then Laura Lopes opened her mouth. Laura is Camilla's daughter from her first marriage, making her Charles's stepdaughter. She's not a princess, doesn't have a title, and generally stays out of the spotlight. She's an art curator and a mother of three who built her own career outside palace walls. She was invited by Camilla, which made sense. But during the evening, Laura told a small group that Princess Anne's old-fashioned view of duty was out of touch with modern Britain. She implied that younger royals like William and Kate brought fresher energy and suggested Anne belonged to another era. On the surface, you could argue it was just a remark about generational differences. But the context made it much worse. This was Anne's celebration, an event designed to honor her lifetime of service. And Laura chose that moment to suggest she was no longer relevant. Anne has spent her entire adult life doing the unglamorous work that keeps the monarchy credible. She doesn't seek applause. She doesn't do splashy interviews or carefully curated Instagram posts. She simply shows up year after year, handling engagements that rarely make headlines but genuinely help communities. Dismissing that as old-fashioned at an event celebrating those contributions wasn't just rude. It misunderstood what the monarchy is supposed to represent. Laura also benefits from this institution. Her mother is queen consort, her stepfather is the king, and she's connected to the family even without an official role. So diminishing someone who devoted her life to that institution felt incredibly tone-deaf. Nearby guests immediately grew uncomfortable. People looked away, hoping the moment would pass. But William heard every word, and his reaction was instant. Usually calm under pressure, his loyalty to the people he loves runs deep. Anne has always been one of those people. He watched her work tirelessly while others grabbed headlines. He's seen her defend the crown through difficult periods, including the aftermath of Diana's death and other family scandals. Hearing someone without an official role dismiss his aunt's lifetime of service struck a nerve. What made it worse was that Anne was close enough to hear the comment. She didn't react outwardly. Anne is famously stoic, but people who knew her noticed the slight tightening of her lips and the subtle shift in her posture. Anne has faced criticism throughout her life. She was often overshadowed by her brothers and dismissed as the less glamorous sibling. But hearing it from within the family at an event celebrating her was different. William saw it all, his fists clenched and his eyes fixed on Laura. He stepped toward her, and the room fell silent. Conversation stopped. Champagne glasses remained untouched as everyone waited to see what would happen next. William never raised his voice, but the silence after Laura's words spoke louder than shouting ever could. His anger was obvious, and everyone understood he wasn't going to pretend nothing had happened. Anne, practical as always, tried to move the evening forward. She redirected attention to her work, shared stories from her early Save the Children visits, thanked supporters, and focused on the purpose of the event. But the atmosphere never recovered. William stayed close to her for the rest of the evening, his protective instincts fully engaged, and the incident became the unspoken topic hanging over every conversation. That night at Windsor Castle revealed tensions that had been building beneath the surface for a long time. The hidden problems within this blended royal family were nowhere close to being resolved. The morning after the reception, Prince William asked to speak with Princess Anne in private. He had spent most of the night replaying everything that had happened, and his protective instincts hadn't faded at all. William usually avoids direct confrontation whenever possible, but when someone he deeply cares about is hurt, loyalty almost always outweighs caution. Anne wasn't surprised by the request. She knows her nephew well enough to understand that he wasn't simply going to move on. The two met in her sitting room at Gatcombe Park, where Anne remained as calm and composed as ever. She quietly listened while William shared his frustration. He couldn't understand why Laura, someone who had benefited from Charles's marriage to Camilla, would criticize a woman who had devoted her entire life to serving the crown. Anne simply brushed it aside. She told William that after enough years in public life, you become used to these kinds of remarks. In her view, Laura's comment was just another opinion from someone who didn't truly understand what royal duty involves. Anne had spent decades being underestimated, criticized, and overlooked, so one more dismissive remark wasn't going to change who she was. William saw it very differently. His respect for Anne ran far too deep to ignore what he believed was open disrespect. He urged her not to let it pass, especially because the criticism had come from within the family itself. He reminded Anne of everything she had sacrificed over the years: missed holidays, endless public engagements, constant travel, and the demanding work that rarely brings headlines, praise, or recognition. William argued that saying nothing would only diminish those decades of dedication. Anne appreciated his concern, but she encouraged him to let it go. Experience had taught her that reacting to careless words often gives them far more importance than they deserve. William, however, had grown up in a very different media environment, where private whispers can quickly become public headlines. He worried that Laura's remark could eventually spread beyond the palace walls, creating the impression of a divided royal family that the media would eagerly amplify. To William, staying silent didn't feel like wisdom. It felt like a gamble. That difference perfectly reflected the contrast between them. Anne believed in absorbing criticism and carrying on. William believed problems should be confronted before they have the chance to grow. Neither approach was necessarily right or wrong, but in this situation they couldn't easily exist side by side. Meanwhile, word of the uncomfortable exchange reached Camilla. Laura has generally remained outside public criticism because she isn't a working royal. Camilla has always tried to shield both of her children, Laura and Tom, from palace politics, believing they deserved a life that wasn't constantly defined by royal expectations. At the same time, she also knew that Laura could sometimes speak a little too freely. When she heard how angry William had become, Camilla felt his reaction was far stronger than the situation required and feared it would only deepen existing tensions. Charles suddenly found himself caught in an impossible position. As king, he was expected to keep the family united. As Camilla's husband and a father figure to her children, he also understood her desire to protect them. Over the years, he had worked hard to help Laura and Tom feel accepted within the wider royal family, even without official titles. Now a single remark threatened to upset that fragile balance. For William, however, this had never been only about Laura. To him, it was about respect for Princess Anne, and by extension, respect for the institution itself. After leaving Gatcombe Park, he remained convinced the issue couldn't simply disappear. He believed Laura should acknowledge what she had said, or that Camilla should at least address it on her daughter's behalf. That determination quietly widened the distance between William and Camilla. He became noticeably more reserved around his stepmother. Whenever possible, he limited joint appearances and kept conversations brief. Palace staff gradually began noticing the change. For years, William had managed to keep his feelings toward Camilla largely private, maintaining a careful balance of politeness and caution. After this incident, even experienced courtiers could sense the growing chill between them. To the public, everything still looked perfectly normal. Royal engagements continued, smiles appeared for the cameras, and official photographs suggested complete unity. Behind palace walls, though, William remained deeply frustrated. Anne stayed composed, Camilla became increasingly guarded, and the atmosphere had quietly shifted. The first visible sign of that tension appeared during a charity gala at Clarence's house not long afterward. The event attracted many familiar faces from the art and cultural world, an environment where Laura felt completely at ease. As an established art curator, she spent the evening greeting guests, discussing exhibitions, laughing with friends, and posing for photographs. Everything changed the moment William arrived alongside Catherine. Even guests who knew nothing about the earlier reception could sense that something felt different. William deliberately kept his distance from Laura, offering none of his usual warmth. Catherine noticed the atmosphere immediately and tried to ease it by spending time speaking with Camilla, but even her calm and gracious manner couldn't completely hide the underlying strain. Eventually, William and Laura found themselves standing face to face. What should have been a routine greeting quickly became an uncomfortable exchange that nearby guests couldn't help noticing. William greeted her politely but with obvious restraint. Laura answered with quiet confidence, clearly believing the entire situation had been exaggerated. In her mind, she hadn't insulted Anne at all. She believed she had simply expressed an opinion about how different generations approach royal duty. William saw something very different. Her refusal to recognize the hurt caused by her words only reinforced his belief that she had shown a lack of respect. Camilla noticed the tension almost immediately and stepped in, gently guiding Laura away while maintaining a polite smile that barely concealed her own frustration. Camilla felt it was unfair that her daughter, who had never chosen to become a public royal figure, was suddenly being judged according to standards she had never accepted. She quietly encouraged Laura to move on, but Laura's pride had already become part of the situation. She had spent years building her own reputation in the art world, separate from royal headlines, and she had no intention of allowing family drama to define her. Throughout the evening, Anne remained exactly as people expected her to be, calm, professional, and focused on her responsibilities. She devoted her time to speaking with donors, encouraging younger members of the royal household, and ensuring the event stayed centered on its charitable purpose. Later, however, Catherine reportedly told close friends that Anne seemed more weighed down than usual, carrying not only her lifelong responsibilities but also the burden of a conflict she had never wanted. Over the following days, conversations quietly spread throughout the palace. Staff members whispered about William's anger, Laura's remark, and Camilla's response. Outside the palace, the public knew nothing. Inside, however, speculation seemed to be everywhere. The very outcome William had feared was beginning to unfold. One careless comment had slowly transformed into a growing story of division, becoming more complicated each time it was repeated. Informal gatherings within the royal family became noticeably more cautious after that. Courtiers quietly adjusted seating plans whenever possible to keep William and Laura apart. Charles did his best to calm the situation, reminding William that Laura hadn't intended to cause harm. William, however, saw things very differently. To him, the impact of Laura's words on Princess Anne mattered far more than whatever her intentions may have been. Intent versus impact is the kind of argument that can go around in circles forever, and this situation was no different. Neither side was willing to change its position. Before long, Charles decided enough was enough. He called for a private family meeting at Buckingham Palace, hoping to address the growing tension before it developed into something even more difficult to manage. Inside a quiet drawing room away from the grand state apartments, William, Anne, Camilla, Laura, Catherine, and Charles gathered in uneasy silence. Charles opened the discussion by reminding everyone that family unity had always been one of the monarchy's greatest strengths. He stressed that the institution's place in modern Britain is delicate and that even private disagreements could damage public confidence if they ever became known. His voice remained calm throughout, but the concern on his face was impossible to miss. Charles had only recently become king, and he was already facing family divisions that threatened the stability he wanted to project. William spoke first, and he didn't hesitate. He said Laura's remark about Anne had crossed a line. He spoke passionately about Anne's lifetime of selfless service, and everyone in the room understood how sincere his words were because they all knew how deeply he admired his aunt. This wasn't about making a dramatic point. William was defending someone he truly believed had become one of the strongest pillars of the royal family. Laura, however, refused to back down. She insisted she had never intended to insult Anne and believed her comment had simply been taken far too seriously. She explained that she had spoken casually and never expected such a simple observation to create so much tension. From Laura's perspective, she had made an offhand remark during a reception and suddenly found herself sitting through what felt like a family intervention. That difference between what she believed she meant and how everyone else interpreted her words became one of the biggest reasons the disagreement proved so difficult to settle. Anne stepped in, just as many expected she would. She admitted the comment had hurt her, but she urged everyone not to let the disagreement grow into something even larger. Her calm voice reflected the quiet strength that has defined her public life for decades. Even so, her attempt to lower the temperature couldn't completely ease the tension filling the room. Camilla spoke next, and her frustration became increasingly clear. She reminded William that both of her children had intentionally stayed away from official royal duties because they never wanted to live under constant public scrutiny. In her view, pulling Laura into palace disagreements was unfair because Laura had built her own career and her own life outside the institution. William wasn't persuaded. He replied that titles weren't the issue. If someone was part of the family and present in those private conversations, their words carried real weight. He argued that it wasn't possible to distance yourself from royal responsibility when criticism appeared, while still benefiting from the close connection to the king and queen. The meeting eventually ended without any real solution. Charles encouraged everyone to move forward, but he couldn't force reconciliation where it simply didn't exist. Anne quietly left and returned to her work with the same steady focus she had always shown, likely already thinking about her next engagement. William walked away frustrated, convinced that his concerns had never been fully recognized. Laura and Camilla left equally convinced that Laura had been treated unfairly and blamed for something that had grown far beyond its original meaning. Although the meeting was over, the divide remained. It wasn't loud or obvious, but it was impossible to ignore. Publicly, the royal family continued smiling for cameras and carrying out official duties. Behind palace walls, however, trust had become noticeably weaker. What makes this entire situation so revealing is that it was never truly about a single remark made during one reception. Laura's comment became significant because of what it symbolized. It raised questions about respect, about who earns it, who defines it, and what happens when someone inside the family appears to question the value of a person who has devoted an entire lifetime to serving the institution. At its heart, it also became a story about loyalty. William's fierce determination to defend Anne stood opposite Camilla's equally strong determination to protect Laura. It showed just how delicate life inside a blended royal family can become, especially when every private conversation carries the possibility of larger consequences. Laura probably never imagined she was creating a family crisis. She most likely believed she was simply commenting on how different generations viewed royal duty. But inside a family shaped by history, tradition, and hierarchy, even casual observations can quickly become something much bigger. No dramatic ending followed. There were no public apologies, no emotional reconciliations, and no official statements. Instead, everyone settled into an uneasy truce. William remained close to Anne, supporting her exactly as he always had. Laura continued focusing on her career in the art world, fully aware that her relationship with William might never completely recover. Camilla stayed fiercely protective of her children, while Charles continued trying to keep everyone united. Anne carried on exactly as she always had. Day after day, she attended engagements, fulfilled her responsibilities, and refused to let personal disagreements interfere with her work. Like so many challenges throughout her life, she carried this one quietly without allowing it to distract from her sense of duty. The cameras never captured any of these private moments. The public continued seeing a united royal family carrying out its responsibilities as usual. Behind the palace walls, though, everyone involved understood that one conversation had left a lasting impression. It exposed tensions that had quietly existed since Charles married Camilla, and the realities of a blended family became intertwined with the formal structure of the monarchy. William's anger that evening was never just about one remark. To him, it was about defending the values he believes keep the monarchy strong: duty, consistency, loyalty, and personal sacrifice. Those principles, in his view, remain essential to the institution's future. Whether this disagreement was simply a family misunderstanding or a sign of deeper tensions inside the monarchy, only those behind palace walls know the full story. What is clear is that moments like these remind us how even the smallest private conversations can leave lasting impressions when they involve one of the world's most closely watched families. What do you think? Did Prince William do the right thing by standing up for Princess Anne, or should the family have simply moved on? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next royal story. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.